Welcome to the setup. We've got Jordan's bow put together. In today's episode, we're going to go through all the steps. And we ended up with getting it partially sighted in, and we'll finish that task over the next couple of days. But this was a long process. It took us, what would you say, 3 hours?
3+ hours probably.
3+. So we're not going to bring you 3.5 hour long episode today, but we may be able to break it up and go into more detail on some of the parts of this sometime in the future. So we're going to go through the high points of the setup, but it's a sweet bow. Go ahead and here, I'll hold it up and we can show them what it looks like here. But so this is the Hoyt Eclipse, and this is their premium women's bow. It's the thing I think that jumps out at me the most is it's got a very smooth draw. You know, some of the bows that I shoot, they're pretty harsh. You know, you get to let off and it's like you're really tugging on it, and then boom, it drops off into a real deep valley. This one's really smooth. It rolls over easy. Jordan didn't have any trouble mastering the draw on this bow. It's, what did I say it was? Length 29 inches long?
27 or 29.
29. You're supposed to remember that. 29 inches long. And brace height is 6 3/4 inches. And I feel like that's a pretty accurate, pretty forgiving brace height. You know, you get much below 7 inches, and that's considered to be a little bit more of a radical design. So we're all set up. We're going to take you through how this came to be, how we took a bow that came out of the box with nothing on it and a box full of accessories and turned it into something that you can kill a deer with. So that's pretty cool. So you can look forward to that in today's episode. So the first thing we're going to start with is the nocking point. And I have to wear these reading glasses. In the nocking point, this is a big trade-off. And with Jordan's, we're going to use a release aid that you connect straight to the string. So she's not going to use a loop. And there's two reasons for that. I started out that way, and I really do like that style. And I may go back to it at some point. But the loop does make it maybe a little bit easier to tune the bow because you're pulling above and below the arrow nock. She's going to be pulling underneath the arrow. And the upside to that is you can get on the string really quick with the release. You don't have to try to catch that loop, which if you're really excited or in a hurry can be pretty tough. I mean, I can do this with not even looking at the bowstring. I can connect below the arrow nock and then slide the release up to the nock. That's why I liked it so well. So the second reason that I like her attaching straight to the string rather than a loop is she is going to be arrow energy limited. Where with my longer draw and heavier draw weight, I can generate a lot more potential energy in the draw, which transfers to kinetic energy, downrange penetration energy. So for Jordan, if she gives up a 1/2 inch of draw length because she's attaching to the loop and going back to the same anchor point, that's just 1/2 inch of potential energy that'd be better for her to be storing in the draw cycle and then transferring to the arrow. So, people don't realize that maybe when they're thinking about using the loop, but you do give up a little bit of potential energy in the draw cycle of the bow, because to pull back to the same point with your release, now you're attaching further from the string. So if you attach to the string itself, you're going to pick up that much more in the draw cycle. The quickest way to start that, to pick your nock point on the bow, is to use a T-square. And I'm going to move some of these accessories back out of the way, and we'll come back to those in just a minute. But the T-square is the quickest way to pick where you're going to put your nock point. And I always go off the middle. They call it the cushion plunger hole. Okay, so there's a threaded. I figured that's about where the arrow should be lined up with. So I want my nock point to be roughly 1/8 inch above that, the bottom of my nock point, because then when you put the arrow in, We'll grab one in a minute. But then when you put the arrow in, it should be at a 90-degree angle to the string. So you're always trying to get the arrow more or less at a 90-degree angle to the string. And I've done that with a piece of paper before, where I've just slid the knock point up and down until it was square. But this way we're working off some point on the bow. And that point on the bow is the middle of that. They used to call it the cushion plunger hole. I'm not sure what they call it now, but it's the rest attachment hole. That's going to be where we want our arrow to go over. I've got this tool here, and this is the TrueFire Pro model crimping tool. I bet you there's not one in 10 tackle boxes now. Maybe there's not one in 100 tackle boxes because people just don't crimp on knock sets anymore. But this tool is awesome because you can really get that baby locked down. So I'm going right about 1/8 of an inch above, and I'm going to crank down on it. Do it from a couple of different angles. If you look at that thing when I'm done, that is not going anywhere. Okay, so we've got a tentative starting point for our knock set. And when we go to tune the bow, we can quickly move that, and that's the beauty of this tool too. I mean, with a loop, once you get the loop on tight, it's kind of hard to move it. But with this thing, it's really easy. You just snap it on there and you flip this little lever and it opens the thing up, you slide it, and then you squeeze it back down again. So there's a lot to be said for going straight to the string with the release, and that's a trade-off we can talk about with the viewers on another day. So now we got to put the rest on. So what have we got? We've got the Integrate MX. This is a Hoyt rest. Quality Archery Designs makes these Ultra rest is the basic style, and Hoyt works with those guys to have one that custom fits right to these bows. So it's kind of a nice setup. And I've talked about these rests before and why I like them. It's a drop away rest. So what that means is when you get the arrow on, you'll flip it up like this. And then when you draw back on the bow, this will pull up to there. But and I can't do it quick enough with my hand, but if you do it quick enough there, you see it went down. So it drops automatically when you release the string. So when you load the arrow, you can just flip it like that. You load the arrow on, you flip that up. See, now the arrow can't fall off. See, it's trapped in there. So no matter how excited you get in the tree stand with that big buck coming in, you can't bounce it out of there. Or if you're stalking in the woods, whatever, and you bump into some brush, it's not going to fall off the rest, and then you see the elk or mule deer or whatever, and you come to full draw and your arrow's not resting correctly. This eliminates that problem. And then, like I said, when you time it, you set this on the harness that's going down, so that as you draw the bow, it pulls up that last remaining little bit. See where it goes up like that last little bit? Then that's where the final position is. It's right there. And then when you release, then it snaps down and then it gets out of the way of the arrow. And it's supposed to give you like a few inches of guidance for the arrow, because you don't want it to be completely gone as soon as the string starts to move. Because there's a lot of energy that gets dumped into the arrow during those first few inches of its forward travel, because you got to think the arrow's sitting there with no load on it. And then all of a sudden, you've got 40 pounds, in your case, of force pushing against it. That's a lot of dramatic energy being dumped into it. And of course, with mine, it's even more. So you want it to stabilize the arrow for a little ways while the arrow's moving forward. So the way that this gets timed, and they've got the directions in here, and we'll read those and make sure we get it right, but you want it to come up right at the end of your draw to the last little part. And that way, the inertia of the rest dropping, it might take, a few inches of time, whatever that translates into in milliseconds, before the rest gets out of the way. It's not instantly out of the way. And so it provides a little bit of guidance for the arrow. And then in theory, it drops out of the way before the fletching gets there. Bows literally were not tunable when I was your age. Half of them probably weren't tunable. But anyway, now the biggest problem that people have with tuning a bow usually is the fletching hitting the rest. So if you eliminate that, because you can imagine if the arrow was going through there and it hits it and it kicks it, you know.
That would be unfortunate.
Yep. So now that's what these drop away rests do. I've got the rest attached, and it's a little bit of a pain to put it on, but you can always take it to a Hoyt dealer. I mean, that's why Hoyt sells their bows through dealers, because that way they're sure that when the customer gets their product that it's going to be set up well and they're going to have a good experience. I mean, I've set up a lot of bows, so it's not a big deal. Anybody with some mechanical ability can easily get that rest on there. But as you see now, it's integrated right into the riser, which is pretty cool. You know, it's not bolted on. It just attaches through the adjustment mechanism right to the riser. And we can turn this little knob and the whole rest slides up and down. So as we're tuning it, it makes it really easy because all we have to do is turn that knob. So now, timing the rise of the rest, so that we're talking about it has to come up at the right time so that it falls at the right time. Because, you know, if it comes up too soon, then it's going to hang too long. Plus it puts an awful lot of stress on this system if it comes up too soon. So we're going to read the instructions. If all else fails, I think I remember from doing this before what they recommend, but they recommend using the little mounting hardware, and I'm sure that's a good idea. I just don't like using it. I don't like looking down at it. So I like to put the cable, the cord that comes from the rest right into the downward moving cable on the bow. So we're going to find out which one that is. When I draw it, you can see this one's moving down. So that's the one that we're going to attach it to, because then as you draw the bow, then it pulls the rest arm up. So the easy way to get it on there, usually you got to go to a bow press, and you've seen my bow press, you know, where you like crank stuff and then it pushes the limbs in. But we're just going to take this Allen wrench and we're going to slide it into this gap where the silencer is, the little rubber dude. And we're just going to slide it up. And it's not sharp enough to damage the bowstring fibers, but this is how we're going to find the middle of that harness, and then that's where we're going to put our cord through the downward traveling harness. I'm sure I'm going to have plenty of people watch this video say, "Wait a minute, how can we do this?" Well, I don't know. It's just the way I do. So this is, I just like streamlining everything. Something in my brain just doesn't like any extra hardware that's not absolutely critical. Okay, so I've got it through the middle now, as you can see. So when the time comes to get that thing so that it's tight at the right time, all we got to do is serve over the top of that with that thread material, and that'll just lock it right down on there. To ensure the proper timing when the bow is drawn, the launcher should move from the capture position to the full draw position within the last inch of the draw. So this is what it looks like when it's done. See how it's tied on there? I didn't even run it through the cable on this one because they had center serving all the way down through there, or, you know, bus cable serving, because it has the roller. Your bow doesn't have the roller. I've got the cord that goes from the rest lightly served into the downward moving harness cable. So this is all still making sense, right? So you could go do this on your next bow?
Yeah, definitely. Worked out great.
That's why they have dealers, right?
Right.
Okay, so now I'm not making it too tight though, because you need, when I draw this, it needs to be able to slide through there, because it needs to, we need to really kind of fine tune where that comes up. So we can't make it super tight yet. So it came up too soon, see that?
Too tight.
Yep, so now I'm gonna give it a little bit of slack. So now we're drawn. Probably pretty close. Okay, where's the last inch? I would say that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just take, there's like a little flapper underneath there.
Mm-hmm.
You just flip that with your thumb and then it drops out of the way. So it lays on like this. You just, again, you got the little flapper on the back. You just flip it up. You know, that's not bad. We're pretty darn close. Look at that. See, it's supposed to go 90-degree angle to the string right over the middle of that hole is what we were planning on.
Pretty close.
So you want to look at it from right dead on so you're not above or below, otherwise that'll skew it. So try to get your eye right at level of that arrow and see if it's going right over the middle of that hole.
Looks like it.
Yeah, it might be.
Maybe a little high?
It might be a little high. Screw in there. So we're going to loosen that. That's what locks this wheel from just being able to move at any given time. And if you look at it, you can see it's got a little indicator. So we're set pretty close to 0. We want to move it down, right?
Yeah.
So the little indicator would go up to a higher one. So I'm turning the wheel. See how the little indicators, so what's happening, the indicator isn't moving, the rest is moving down. So when we put the rest on, we lock that piece in. So now we've just dropped it a little ways, not far. Personally, I like my rest to be just a little low, if anything, because I want the arrow to come out. I don't like the arrow to come out like this, and then it's like the tail end of the arrow is almost like it's looking to hit the rest. I would rather arrow comes out just a little bit tail high, because then it seems to clear the rest just a little bit easier. If you're going to err on one side or the other, I would rather err with the tail being higher than the front. So that means I would drop this rest just a little bit more. Arrow out, rest is done for now. We'll have to tune it later. The other thing we do too is there's a material you can put on the rest that silences it when you draw it back. And sometimes I use this moleskin. That does a really nice job too of silencing it, because you don't want the arrow when it comes across the rest to go. So you always put something on there that's, you know, fabricy or fuzzy, or like the piece that comes with the rest. Then you don't get that sound. Next, we need to put the peep sight in, and to do that, we're going to have to go out into the shop. So that'll be our next step. But the peep I'm using the 1/4 inch for you, Meta Peep Hunter. This is from G5, and I've used these things for as long as they've made them. They're nice peeps. 1/4 inch is big. It's a big peep, and that allows you to really see well through it. Even when you close your left eye, if you close your left eye, I like to squint my left eye. I don't close it all the way. And we'll play with that when you get outside and start shooting it. But I do it because I want to be able to see better. I want to knock the dominance down on my off eye so that it doesn't try to take over the sight picture. Because, you know, we're getting a little technical now, but when it starts to get darker out, your right eye, if you're shooting right-handed and right eye dominant, gets impeded by the peep sight. So it can't see as well. So your body wants to compensate by having the left eye take over the sight picture. So if you've got both eyes open, you can run into a deal in low light where your left eye is the one that's looking through or looking at the pin. Well, that's going to have you all messed up, because you got the both sighted in with your right eye looking through the peep, lining up with the pin. And then all of a sudden your left eye says, oh, I want to control. So to compensate for that, I squint my left eye and knock the dominance down in that one. So that way, even in low light, it doesn't take over the sight picture. You know, I can see the deer moving, I can see branches better, because there's so much stuff that happens during that final moment that the more things you can see and be aware of, the better. I mean, the setup that we put together for you is going to be really easy because there's no branches. You know, you don't have to worry about it. Sometimes you go into a new spot and you throw a stand up and you don't have any shooting lanes or anything. It's like, man, oh man, I really got to be able to see, you know, because I'm shooting through holes. You might only be shooting through a hole like that. You know, you're shooting through a hole the size of, you know, these windows. So that makes it a lot easier. So anyway, that's why I prefer aiming with both eyes open, but squinting my non-aiming eye, the left eye. All of this to say, that's why we're using a big peep. You can see better. You can see what's going on, what's coming. But to compensate for the fact that it's big, we've got a sight with a round pin guard on it. This actually glows in the dark, that green ring, which is pretty cool. So at the end of legal shooting time, you'll be able to see the outside perimeter of that. And when you draw, you know, you're looking through this peep at that sight, and you can center the sight housing inside the peep. So it's like, remember when you were shooting a gun, you've got a rear sight and a front sight, and you have to line the front side inside the back one, and that's how you know that everything is locked in. Well, the Peep is the rear sight, and the pin, of course, is the front one.
Right.
And if you're letting it float all around inside the Peep, then you're not going to be very precise. So rather than trying to center individual pins inside of a great big Peep, we're going to center the pin housing, which allows you to be a lot more precise because that just fits inside the Peep when you're aiming. And you'll see it, it's pretty cool. We got to put this in this. And Hoyt did us a little favor. They put they marked the center of the string. And anytime you're putting the Peep in, you want it in the center because that's going to be the most stable. If you have it someplace else, let's say it's a 26 strand string and you've got 15 strands on one side and 11 on the other,
Right.
then when you draw it back, it's going to tend to want to turn the Peep. So the most stable place on the whole string is right, because the string is made by doing continuous loops, and then they twist it all up later. So if you can go to the middle of that, it's going to be the most stable. So when you draw the bow back, it's not going to want to rotate, because you don't want that Peep turning. And one time you shoot and it's right dead on, and then you come back and it's like, oh, you can't see through it. So they marked that for us. That's what that string is. That tells us where the middle of the string. That's what this little cord tells us where the middle of the string is. So all we got to do when we put it in the bow press is separate that right there and put the Peep in there, and that should make it the most stable possible. We've got the Peep installed, and it's not coming back like perfectly square yet, because obviously when you draw it back, you want it to come back where you can see through it. But we're not going to worry about that yet because we're going to have to slide it up and down the string. That'll be the last thing that we do once we get the Peep lined up with the sight, lined up with your eye at your full draw anchor point. Then we'll go back, we'll take the string off, use the bow press, put half twists or full twists into the string until this is just perfect coming back. Next step, putting the sight on. So let's talk about the Fuse products a little bit. This is the Vectrix XT, and I've been shooting these fixed pin Fuse sights for, I think it's been 15 years now, almost as soon as Fuse came out back in the earliest days. And they're very, I would say, economical for what they are. They're really high quality sights, and I think Fuse is one of the most overlooked accessories companies. So we're putting Fuse on. And one thing that they've done that we're gonna pass on to our viewers is they've set up a 10% off sale. Fuse has, you have to go right to their website, fusearchery.com, and type in promo Winke, W-I-N-K-E, all capitals, at the checkout, and you get 10% off any of the Fuse accessories. So.
Because I think they used to be dealer only until fairly recently.
Yeah.
They just started selling them on the website.
That's right.
The
I think.
Accessories.
Yeah, only maybe very recently.
Yeah, like weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean, obviously we want everybody to support the dealers because you can still get them at the dealers, but this is just a way for somebody to pick up a quick sight, because there's not always a Hoyt dealer right where they, it's one thing to set a bow up, it's another thing to buy a sight and slap it on your bow. You don't need a whole lot of support to do that. So we're going to get this Vectrix XT out of the package. Well, with whitetails, he's going to be 20 to 30 yards away when we got two pins, a 20, 30, maybe we'll set the 40. Maybe we'll just take it completely out, just so we don't have to look at it. So the green is, I always feel like the green is the easiest one to see. So they've got that set on the top for your 20 yard. And then, because that's the one you're going to use most of the time.
Does it come set at 20?
Nope, we'll do that. Yep. So that'll be part of the rest of what we do in today's setup mission.
What if the shot is closer than your closest pin? Like what if it's a 15-yard shot, but your lowest pin is a 20-yard pin?
The trajectory on an arrow, when it comes out of the bow, so you've got your line of sight, that's one thing to think about. Then you've got the actual, the path of the arrow, which is the trajectory of the arrow, it goes up, crosses your line of sight, and then drops back to the sight-in distance. So I like to have, where my anchor point is, I think is fairly low. So my crossover is out there, closer to 20. And I feel like with that setup, and that's where I'm gonna have you too, I'm gonna have you anchor and, right underneath your earlobe with the back knuckle of your index finger. That keeps you, that's a fairly low anchor. I mean, some people will anchor, almost where the arrow's up by their eye. Well, then the path of the arrow is dropping away from the sight path, where it starts way above it, kicks way above it early, and then drops back. I'll get it right. But anyway, I like it where it crosses over at about 10 yards and then drops back. Well, you're never more than just a couple of inches away from your arrow path and your line of sight. So in other words, your 20-yard pin is going to be really accurate anywhere from roughly 5 yards to 20 or 24, whatever, as it starts to drop past that spot. All right.
I did not realize how complex this is.
Well, maybe I'm making it complex.
Well, there's just so many intricate details that go into shooting a bow.
Well, and that's the unfortunate part about archery too. And maybe where the value of what we're doing comes in is because it's intimidating for people. I mean, what if you didn't have me to help you? How would you get into this on your own? It's like you've got to have a mentor almost. And that's unfortunate, because we want to see the sport grow, but it can't grow without somebody to teach people. So maybe that will be our role somewhere along the way too, where we start creating more content for people who are beginners, because it's so much of the content that I've created over the years, whether it's for the magazines or for video, has been geared towards people who have some experience. And we just assume that everybody's got experience. Well, how do you get it?
People who don't have it, don't have it.
No, and if they don't have a grandfather or a father or an uncle or somebody, or a buddy or somebody that teaches them, how do they get started?
Right.
Because there's just a lot of stuff to figure out. So all we're doing now is attaching the sight to the bow. We've got to get the rest set left and right so that it lines up with the forward travel of the string. And again, this gets complicated, right? You wouldn't think all this stuff. You just slap the stuff together and start shooting. Well, if you do, your arrow is going to be fishtailing all over the place. So what you want is for the arrow to line right up with the forward thrust of the string. Because let's say if the arrow is pointed this way,
Right.
then the string goes forward, it's going to kick that arrow super bad sideways.
Right.
So we're always figuring out, okay, we got to get this rest right in line with the forward travel of the string. And the nice thing is the bows have gotten so much better. Like I told you back in the early 90s, when I started really getting serious about the technical stuff, bows were so bad. Oh my gosh. You couldn't count on anything lining up anywhere. Everything was like massive trial and error until you could get the bow tuned. Now, most bows are good enough that they've got them set. They've got the cams positioned in the limbs so that the string lines up with the center of the grip. That's where it should. And that's probably a good starting point for us. So we just have to move the arrow rest in or out so that when we're lining the string up with the center of the grip, that the arrow is lined up with it. And if you look at it right now, what do you see? So line the string up with the center of the grip. And what do you see with the arrow?
It's too far. The rest is too far to the left.
That's right. So we got to bring it in
Right.
in order to get that arrow lined up with the forward travel of the string. We got to figure out how do we do it. I think we just loosen this little dude here and then turn this. And then that'll click, 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 click it in. So we got to get the right wrench on that. See, we got a bunch of them scattered around here now. Okay. Okay, so I loosened the little set screw on the launcher. Now I should be able to turn this, yes. See, I can turn it, hear the little clicks? Click, click, click. Okay, so I'm turning it and I'm moving it closer to the riser. So as I'm doing it, I'm just gonna eyeball right down the line, string lined up with the middle of the grip, turning. And you can see how precise and minor an adjustment might be that would make an impact on how the arrow flies. Some people are really, really good at doing this right away, right first try. Takes me a while to get a bow perfect, but now we've got that lined up, and I'll let you look at it.
That looks pretty good.
So the arrow's going right square in line with the grip. So now I'm looking down on it. I'm going to try to stay in the camera here. So I'm looking down on it with the arrow resting down in the bottom of the rest, and I'm lining it up. It's going right across the two limb holes because I'm looking down on those. Now I'm looking at the stabilizer piece that I put in there, and I want to make sure that it's roughly parallel with that. And it is. There's one little movement that we're still off. This is probably the most critical way you can do this. We got to move it just a tad little bit to the left. It's not quite perfect, so let's see if I can get that.
No idea what this shot is going to look like, but that's okay.
I think that might have microed it in there. Yes. So now the arrow is perfectly dead in line with the holes that you screw the limb down with. So in theory, it's dead in line with the middle of the limb, which if it's well built, the string track on the cam should be dead in line with the middle of the limbs too, which again, should be dead in line with the middle of the grip. So all those things line up. So now we can lock this back down again on the rest. So the next step now is to do the early adjustments on the sight. And this is, all we're looking for is we line the string up with the arrow, and the pins are usually going to be just a little bit to the left of that, because when you draw the bow kind of pivots in your hand just a little bit because of the side pressure that comes on this thing. It kind of causes the bow just to pivot. So those pins, before you draw it, it always looks like the pin is to the left of the line of the arrow. But then when you draw it, the bow makes that little pivot in your hand, and then the pins line up. So when you're getting it ready to get it, close to being on your spot, the pins are going to be slightly left of the arrow. When you look down,
I mean, they are to the left.
A long ways to the left.
Yeah.
They need to be just like maybe twice the size of the sight pin head to the left of the arrow.
Oh, I see.
To the left of the string. So it should be just a tiny little bit. So now we got to move it in quite a bit, correct? Now, here's where it gets more precise. Okay, I think that's about it. Arrow, string lined up, and everything, and the pins are just a little bit to the left.
Just a little bit.
Yep. Okay, so now we can go ahead, lock that back down again, so it can't move. We don't like stuff that moves. Now, we can go outside. You can hook your release on, and we can see, first thing we're going to look at is that location of the peep. We want that peep, when you get your anchor point established, we want that peep to come right back and line up with your eye, and then roughly with the sight body. Remember, it was coming in at a 90-degree angle. So I put it in the bow press. I took the tension off the string, real simple, took the end of the string off, and I just gave it one twist on the bottom part of the string. And that turned it maybe a little bit more than 90 degrees, so we'll see when you shoot it outside again if it comes back square, but it's sitting square now. See, it's right in line with, more or less right in line with your eye. I did set the pin gap on the sight to be about what I thought it would be. The pin gap is the distance between the pins. So the faster the bow is, the smaller that gap gets. And the slower it is, the wider it gets from your 20 to your 40 because your trajectory is more looping. So I set it to based on roughly what I think your bow is shooting for speed. I set a gap that seems to make sense. So we'll go outside, and when you sight this in now, we're not going to move the individual pins. Now we're going to move the whole housing up and down because we've already got the gap about roughly correct. So we'll be shooting with the 20-yard pin, which is the top one. We'll move it up and down, and basically you're following the arrow. So if the arrow's high, you move the sight housing up, and vice versa. If it's left, you move it left. Obviously the other ones fall in too. So let's go out and take a few shots, see where we're at, but this is almost finished. We'll come back in, put the quiver on, talk about the bow itself a little bit, because we haven't done that yet. We've talked about all the stuff we put on it, but we haven't talked about the bow.
How about when we're sighting that in, how do we take into account the fact that maybe I'm just not very good at aiming? Like, how can you guarantee that you get it to be accurate considering human error in there?
Well, you do it, I always figure it takes me a minimum of 5 days to sight in a bow. You're gonna have some days where you're good. And just remember those days, when you're shooting well, that's probably the days when you get the most work done. If you're shooting bad, you're like, okay, well today's just for, working on technique, getting my strength, and so forth. But you got days when you're steady, things seem to really be clicking, like I'm really shooting well today. Those are the days when you take everything that you do to heart. Like if it's 2 inches low at 20, you say, okay, I've got to lower that 20-yard pin. You don't say, well, maybe it's just today. So tomorrow we'll pick it back up again and we'll see where that group is. If it's still high and to the right, then we'll move the sight body up and to the right very slightly and bring that group right back onto the bullseye. But it was pretty good overall. Like I said, for the first time you've shot this bow, to hold a group that size, it's a good point. Within a few days at 20 yards, that'll be right down to a baseball size because there aren't a lot of fundamentals in archery and they're pretty easy to learn. Yeah, to shoot 70 yards, that's different. But to have a good ethical accuracy at 20 yards, most people can attain that if they know what those fundamentals are. And so we'll have you good to go within a few days. We're going to put this quiver on here and let's talk, my reading glasses. Let's talk a little bit about quivers. And the reason we have a removable quiver here is because we're always more accurate without a quiver on the bow.
Why?
Because the weight of the arrows, two reasons. The weight of the arrows cause the bow to fall to the side. That was loud. Try that again. So the weight of the arrows cause the bow to fall to the side. So like let's say you got 4 arrows in there and 1 arrow on the bow and you shoot. Well, now the arrow, whatever it's doing after the arrow leaves the bow is what it's starting to do while the arrow is still attached to the bow. So if you're like, okay, it fell to the right, on the follow through, well, it was starting to fall to the right even as the arrow was moving forward on the string. So you end up with arrow impact on the side of the quiver. And it can become pretty significant on longer shots. That's why a lot of Western shooters, they'll practice, do a lot of practicing with the quiver on the bow.
Yeah, I was going to say, couldn't you just practice like that and then get used to it, and then it wouldn't be have an impact anymore if you were just used to shooting it like that?
Okay, so the falling to the side is one reason. The other reason is like, okay, it's really windy outside.
Right.
That's why we're doing our interviews in here today, because we can't be out there because of the howling noise in the microphone. So let's say you're holding the bow up and the wind is impacting. And if you've got 4 arrows on there, there's even more wind resistance.
And the flushings and stuff.
That's right. So the wind is going to push your bow arm around a lot more than if there's no arrows on there. So to start with, you're going to be more accurate without the quiver. So let's not have one on there because we don't need one for what we're doing. So we're getting into a blind or we're climbing into a tree. When we get in or up, we'll take the quiver off and we'll hang it next to us someplace where it's within quick reach. And we've been talking about the fuse accessories, and don't forget you can get 10% off these at fusearchery.com using the promo code Winke, W-I-N-K-E, all caps. This is Alpha Strike. This is a 5-arrow quiver. It's a removable quiver. So we're unboxing it for the first time. We haven't had this apart yet. What does all this stuff say? Rotate mounting bracket 180 for installation. Okay. Now it's got an extra broadhead. I guess it's an insert. And it looks like, and this is one of their selling points, they've got a nice cutout in there for the broadheads. You know, so some of them, they just have foam, and you know, when you push your broadhead in there, it either dulls the broadhead or it causes your mechanical broadhead blades to open. This one here, if you look in there, you can see it's got some pretty nice cutouts. Rotate 180. And then we'll adjust how high, you know, when we get the arrows in there. So that's locked. So this little dude here, remember we were talking about when we're putting the sight on, that we attach the quiver to the same sight block. So this wheel loosens it, that slides off. This is what we're going to attach right there. So we need the screws. You can do it. Yeah. I'm more than happy for you. My eyes, I can barely even see it, let alone do it. So you're going to be a bow technician.
Right. That is my next career interest.
Good. Got to have goals. Okay. So I'm going to go grab the arrows while you're finishing that. Yeah, we haven't buckled it down yet. That's what we're going to do last, because I want to get it like up and down so that I don't like having the arrow stick out past the bottom of the bow. Because then if you set it down, the nocks can fill with dirt. And that's a bad thing, because sometimes you don't forget or you don't remember to clean them out again, and you grab an arrow quick and it's full of dirt.
It's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing. Okay, so we're going to slide it up. Now we would have to offset it if we're going to slide it much further, because we have to get over the top of that. So it's far enough. I mean, we're past the end of the bow. So now I'm just going to tighten this. So it's not touching. I'm going to pivot a little bit more. Now it's for sure not touching. We'll lock it in. There you go. So then what I normally do is I'll have a little hook or something in the tree stand and just hang it from this thing on top next to me someplace, usually near my right hand, because I'm, you know, a right-handed shooter. So I got my bow in my left hand. I reach down and grab it with my right hand and just keep shooting until there's no deer left. Okay, so that was, that's the Alpha Strike. Yeah, it's pretty nifty. I like
Really
that.
cool.
I like how it matches the color of the bow
Same.
too.
It's very aesthetically pleasing.
Yep. Okay, so now this is going to go back on. You can see just snaps right down in there. Perfect. And this one is, this next piece is optional. And again, very loud. We've got a stabilizer, and this is, they call it the front line. This is a fuse front line. The upside of the stabilizer is this little rubberized, there's weight on the end, and there's a rubberized connection between it and the rigid part of the stabilizer. So when you shoot, it'll wobble around a little bit, and that soaks up some of the vibration of the shot. So it does make it a little bit more pleasing in the hand, because that's soaking up some of the vibration of the bow. And in theory, it makes it a little bit quieter too, because anytime you soak up vibration, it's not being transferred, you know, into the airwaves as sound. So the other option, if you don't want to go full length, is just to put this little dude on by himself. And that's kind of cool too. But the main thing, functionality of a stabilizer, that serves some purpose, soaking up vibration, but the main functionality is to stabilize the bow, where you know, you want your bow to sit level in your hand. And we're not going to be shooting with the quiver on. You know, so that's not this has got to go. You know, if we were hunting with the quiver, we would try to stabilize it or balance it with the quiver. But since we're not, see now there's a lot of forward tip on this bow, and that's not bad. I'd rather have a forward tip than a rearward tip. I sure don't like shooting bows that tip back. That's pretty bad. And I've shot a few like that. So we don't need this. This is optional, but it is pretty cool. So now, see, it's pretty stable now. If you hold it out there, pretty well balanced. Just take a real relaxed grip with your hand and let it float. Tips back a little bit.
No, my hand might just be tipped back.
Your hand tips back a little bit. Okay, so I don't think we need a stabilizer on this bow. So I think what we're going to do, just because I love this little doinker thing, is put it on, and that's the way we're going to hunt with this one. But if your bow was not balanced well in your hand, if you're a target shooter, they make really long stabilizers that are like 2 to 3 feet long, and then that really creates an advantage with the inertia, because it's hard to twist a bow or anything when it's that long. So you're not quickly able to move it up, down, left, right, because that long stabilizer resists that rotation. But this stabilizer isn't long enough to serve that practical purpose.
Right.
So all it does is either balances the bow or soaks up vibration. So I think we'll shoot it like this. What do you think?
I like it.
Do you like it better with this?
Nah.
Okay. So this thing's decked out. So now we got a finished bow.
Yeah. We need to talk about the bow.
We do. Okay, let's do that next.
It's not funny.
What? It isn't funny. No, but somehow you seem to think it is. All right.
My collectors.
Looking at the camera. So we got the bow completed, and we've got maybe 2 days left of shooting it to get the final sight in, and Jordan should be good to go. We're gonna, obviously when we hunt with it, we're gonna keep the shots really short. So we're not worried about being the world's greatest archers just yet. So let's do a quick recap. What we're, putting it together and shooting it, like the whole overall experience of this project, what jumps out as you is something that maybe you didn't expect, or the most memorable part?
The first thing that I noticed about it, even taking it out of the box, was that it's shockingly light. I don't know if it's just because Mom's old bow was an older model or heavy, but compared to this one, this feels just night and day lighter, even in Drew's from whenever, so light. 2014 or so, or 12, whenever he got that. Yeah, it was the weight of it, I guess, and it fits really well in my hand too. It's easy to hold. It's not awkward, and it feels like it just fits like my size and frame really well.
Yeah, good. And I've always been a fan of the Hoyt grips. I like a smooth, kind of a hard grip. Some people, for some reason, they like a rubbery grip, that kind of sticky in their hand, but I don't like that, because I like a grip that pivots, so that you can't twist on it. It falls into the natural position every time. This one is relatively fast. I mean, if this would have been a men's bow 15 years ago, it would have been one of the fastest ones on the market. But technology has moved, progressively ahead. So the bows have gotten faster and faster, but for as smooth as it is, it's fast enough too. So it covers all the bases. Lightweight, smooth, fast, nice grip. It's got all the features that you need, as far as some of the upscale stuff that Hoyt's putting on their bows. And it had a modular, the cams are modular, so when we got it, it was set for 25 inches. And we decided that you're a 25.5-inch draw. We may drop back to 25 before we're all the way done. So one of the things we did right away before we even started setting it up was put the different modules on the cams, and it was really quick and easy. we could adjust it from a 25 and a half or a 25 to a 25 and a half in like 2 minutes. So those were the things that jumped out at me. The process takes a lot longer than you probably think. Yeah, and thus the reason that we need independent dealers. Somebody's got to mentor the young bow hunters, and it's nothing simple. I shouldn't say that. Once you've done it a couple times, it's not hard, but it's intimidating if you've never done it.
I would have had no idea where to start.
Yeah, so that's important to the future of archery and bow hunting, that we have people that can help young bow hunters get into the sport. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We know that there's a lot of things we had to skip over here, and we do have all that footage. So we're going to come back again, and maybe during the off season, after the hunting season, we'll see. Maybe we'll drop them in as we go. But I know I've got another bow to set up. I've got one. It's the Torx XT, and I'm going to put that together, and I'm going to do some hunting with that because, yeah, I mean, I love the RX-7 Ultra. I mean, who wouldn't love that bow? But it's not realistic for a lot of people because it's a fairly expensive bow. So I'm going to put one together that's on the lower end of the price line for Hoyt, and I'm going to hunt with that some too. And it's got a fuse accessory package that's, again, a lower price point, more economical, more value driven. So that'll be next week's setup. But we accomplished a lot today. You go from being a girl shooting her mom's bow to being a woman bow hunter with her own bow.
Girl with a bow.
We'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching.